person is able to do it herself or himself. So really, short practices are best, and that's especially true with small talk, which is our topic today. And Laurie has some wonderful goodies. I was excited to even get them if and when I get another student. At any rate, let's stop for a second, ask yourself, what is small talk? Just think about that for a minute. When we said we were going to make this session, what do we mean? Why is it important? Ask yourself that. Laurie gave us some reasons. He told us the students want to be okay and comfortable in America and talking with people they don't know. But we always must caution them, even if their goal is to get into talking with strangers or with newly acquainted people that are going to become social friends. Careful to talk with appropriate subjects. Not religion, not politics. Comfortable topics that all of you use sometimes when you don't know what to say. And I'm going to make a big connection. I meet with a lot of people because I've been in the world of teaching and learning for so long. You know, there are times when I have to go to a social event and I'm thinking, what kind of small talk can I bring to this group? I don't want to talk about myself. My goodness, so many years in education. Now they know I'm old because if I told them that. So I begin to think about topics that I might bring, and I have to be careful. My goodness, today, no politics for sure. Another broad look at that is help your student discuss with you what I just discussed with you. What are we doing the small talk for? Why do we do small talk? I know you know the answer. We do it to connect with people because we want to be included. Isn't that part of it? Seeking information, that's small talk. Talking about a concern, that's small talk when you first begin the discussion. And I want you to remember probably 2 or 3 things, because after I've talked to you for 7 minutes, you've already thought about your shopping list or your groceries you got to do. I want to get this to you. We all have a different reason for going into small talk. Number 1, it is harder to teach small talk than it is to teach grammar, in my opinion. Grammar has a structure and a chart we can depend on. Small talk comes from out here somewhere. So with that said, one more thing I'd like you to remember. When someone begins a conversation with you and you really would like to answer, but you don't have much to say, help your student to not say yes or no answers. That kind of shuts the door on the talk. It's over. Better if you don't know what to say and you're not sure what you heard, since your vocabulary may not be there, say to this person who's trying to engage you, tell me about that. Would you help me understand a little more? And then that opens up the door. And let me tell you why that's important even. It's important. I know Americans like to talk. Most people like to talk. They like to talk a lot. So when you get them to talk, you are beginning to get an opportunity to share some ideas. And so I think if you remember that and talk to your students about they do not need to be intimidated if they don't know the words to bring to the conversation. And now here comes something else that's important to what all I say today. The most important part of the small talk delivery that you give your students will be Tell them to listen, even if they don't understand what's being said. The reason they should listen is because it brings them an opportunity to just hear the tone of voice. And I know, unfortunately, in the foreign-born student's head is a little person who's saying, translate, translate, translate. If you can help your students, tell that little voice, it's my turn to listen. I don't want to hear from you now. I'm listening in English. And it does take time to convince them of that. Just have them practice with you. And as I said, Laurie's going to give you such wonderful examples of how you can keep that conversation going. I'm going to ask you now, because I've probably talked for about 5 minutes, and I'm going to lose your thinking. So let me hear from some of you, because I have about 5 steps that students can master when they're doing the instructional part of learning to do small talk. Let me hear questions from you, because that will help me go to where I'd like to talk next about informal and formal conversation. What I mean by that is this. You see someone in the family has a brand new blouse on. Oh, is that beautiful? How much does that cost? We don't want to say that to a stranger. We want to come in with a more gentle approach. Oh, that's beautiful. I would love to be able to own that blouse. Where did you get it? See, that much different thing than how much does that cost? You don't say that to a person in that way when you first meet someone. That's a difference that you can hear and feel between informal and formal. So now, let me hear your questions, and maybe I can then go to the other 5 steps that I have for working to become a small talker. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. I have an advanced student who, when it comes to communication skills, I mean, she's fairly good, but she'll come to a place where she can't figure out a word she wants to say. And it's like she's stuck and doesn't know how to go on. What could I suggest for her?
The translator is in her head. She's trying to move from the word she wants that's ideal in her own language to the English word. Encourage her to use whatever word she has available that she knows in English that might come close to the real word, because I believe all of us want to be clear and wonderful speakers. I've had a lot of practice, but there are times when I'm stuck and I don't even know another language. So I'm saying to you, use the words you have, even if you sound like you're rumbling around. And don't forget, everybody, 7% of talking are the words. All the rest is body language, facial expressions. And you don't always have that on Zoom because the picture's too small. So the tone of voice has to work for us. Oh, I would like to tell you my feeling about that. Words that when you're attempting to communicate. So encourage risk-taking and use the words you have, dear student.
Okay.
An opinion, just say, well, I'm going to try these words. You can say that to your person. They're happy to be with you. I'm going to try telling you this in a different way. Do you mind? You see what I've done? I have encouraged myself by saying that to the other person. Another question from anybody right now?
Thank you.
Janet, it doesn't work, call me. I'll give you my phone number.
Okay.
And anybody else, I'm happy to give you, I'll give it to you at the end, or Laurie will, she knows any of you can call if you want me to restate or you want to argue with me. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I'd like that. Okay, I talked about formal and informal talk. I know you know the difference because you are skilled conversations, you're out in the public. Other language we have to help our student understand when we're having a health interview with a doctor or a staff person in a medical office, that's different talk, small talk. Interviews, if you're going to try and get a job, different. Work situations, and don't forget language prompts. All them prompts. Again, you will see them in the presentation we have later on. There are prompts for replying to requests. And here's something I also want you to tell your students. Teach them the words, I'd rather not talk about that right now. They need to learn how to say that with the same voice I just used. Because there will be times when someone will say, you know, something horrible about their documentation or whatever. To say, oh, well, please allow me not to talk. I'd have to talk about it another time. That's a bunch of vocabulary that will function for getting them to a place they need to be. I hope that makes sense because I thought a lot about that. Making a request, words have to be handled, whether they're formal in your family. Hey, give me the ketchup. I need that ketchup bottle. You're in a place with unknown people or just social people. Would you please pass the ketchup? Help them see the difference between the tone of voice and the style of asking. And above all, when you're in a social situation or in a working situation, they need to understand that they can say words that are encouraging. Boy, I really like the way you did that. That's not a lot of words, but that goes a long way. When I get off and Laurie said, you did a terrible job, I'm going to feel awful. But if Laurie says to me, wow, that was great. And now I'm going to ask you something else to do. And that makes me happy. So words of encouragement are very important. And later on, I can talk about apologizing or complaining. Those are the toughest ones, especially when you realize you stepped off into something you don't want to be into. If there's a question now, Laurie, help me spot if anybody raises a hand or just jump in. Okay, I don't see anyone coming out. I have 5 steps, okay? The first one is establish friendly talking words as vocabulary with your students. Help them understand, oh, that's nice. I like that. I wish that I had. Simple things that you know come out of your mouth and lots of times. So think about the words. And you may have some, I confess, there are risk-taking when I want to do some social talking. I don't know the people, and maybe I don't even care for them, or I don't want to get involved. So they need to have some comfortable words that they can use, and you can practice them with them. And then I also think a very good idea, ask your student, how did small talk work in your culture? And that's a wonderful way to begin. Did you talk about food? Did you talk about cooking? Did you talk about travel? Did you talk about family? Find out how that conversation went in their own culture. I think that's important because then they'll make that link. We cannot teach, and I sound like a broken record. Learning happens when you connect something that's unknown and it's connected to something previously understood and known. The more you tie those things together, the quicker the new strategy or the new learning may take place. So, common interest. When you're going to be with some people you don't know, somebody said today, gardening. Gardening is big, whether it's in another country or here. Gardening is a small talk subject. And you can role play. Do you have a garden? Simple. Do you wish you had a garden? There's a word to talk about. I have a garden. But I don't know the lady who's got all the tomatoes. I don't have any tomatoes. I'm coming over. At any rate, it's important to bring the small talk to something that's real and interesting. Making comparisons for that advanced student, where you may compare one way of living or celebrating holidays in one country as compared to our country. Making comparison takes quite a bit of vocabulary, but it's good for small talk when the student can develop that vocabulary. Be careful, and help the student be careful. Don't make judgments unless you're saying it's something, well, I really don't care for tomatoes, so I'm not going to grow any tomatoes. I mean, that's okay to say, isn't it? I don't care for tomatoes, simple thing. And, or I don't like meat, whatever. So be careful when you make a judgment, rather than perhaps putting it out there like something judging the other person. Our students may not understand that. So help them get into a situation where you initiate small talk and they try to tell you they have a different opinion. Now that's getting to be work, isn't it? But help them hear that you want them to challenge you, and teach them the word challenge. You want them to say, I don't think that is right for me. It's okay to help them make a gentle, with the right tone of voice, the right facial expression, and the few words, could I tell you how I feel about that? You could teach them, could I tell you how? Those are phrases that you could put out there for small talk. Just like you could say, I don't really want to talk about that now. Those are two key pieces that I use with my students. And now comes a real big one. I hope you have a pencil. Our students need to know when they're engaged in a conversation when to stop talking. Uh-oh. Now what is she telling us? Student is hearing some discussion. Student is feeling a little uncomfortable. Doesn't quite have the vocabulary. Remember the phrase I said? They're not comfortable. They don't like what they've heard. Tell me more about that is a good one to put right there, because now listening must come out. You've got to listen, because even if you don't, that word just, when I meet with tutors, I always talk about when you're reading and you don't have all the words and you don't understand them. Even I don't understand. And my example, same one I always give you, fourth dimension math, I know nothing about it. I can read it, but I can't understand it. So if you don't understand what you're hearing in the conversation and you want to be a part of it, help your student say, oh, excuse me, I would like to know more about that. A simple phrase, excuse me, I would love to know more about that. Oh, that's interesting. And that's a compliment. So those are some of the steps that I really focus on. If you have a question at this point, I don't want to keep going. And then, Laurie, you cut me off when we're ready to go to those beautiful samples you have. I have some steps on how to deal with this conflict, because it's difficult when they don't have vocabulary. Any questions so far that you want, or any idea that you tried and didn't work?
I had a question about which are exactly the 5 steps. You said number 1, but then you kept talking, so I'm not sure where 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Well, the vocabulary, use the words you have. And I might not have said, I didn't put in, number 5 was no politics, no religion, because that's risky. And the other one is work on the culture talk, the topics they talk about, small talk that they use in their own cultures, and find some common interests by sharing that you have a garden, or that you ride a bike, or that you walk, or whatever you do. And listening is my last and most important point. We want them to be able to turn that person in your head who keeps translating off and teach them how to do that, to just concentrate to the sound of the words they heard. Sound of the words. You hear what I just did? Show them. Did you see how I just spoke to you? Oh, when Mary Ellen asked me a question, I took a serious response voice. I didn't have that, that sing-songy. These are the words that we emphasize, the words that are important in the sentence. And you had an expert on last time. Laurie brought us a teacher on who taught us pronunciation. And I need to go over that 10 times before I get it. There's a lot to know. But help them hear, oh, that's different from, oh. You hear it? And don't cut off the conversation with, no, yes, that's a killer. So far. Okay, now let's fix up some more things. Trying to translate. How do you convince your student to do that? One strategy I do use is I'll start a conversation with them, and I don't let them talk. Write down what came into your mind in your own language. Then try to translate what came into your mind in English. I found it worked, but it needed to be done many times. And then I also would write a comment, and I would wait and watch the student. I'd say, I really don't like to be in a place where people are very loud and noisy. I might make a comment like that. Now that's a thinking question. All right, now you think about what I said. What would you want to respond if I said, well, I don't like to be, and by the way, this happens to be true for me. I don't like to be in a place where people are very loud and noisy and everybody's talking on top of everybody else. What would be your response? Anybody out there want to give me an answer, what you might want to say? Because maybe we're in a room where a lot of people are loud and noisy.
Nancy is raising her hand. Nancy, do you want to unmute yourself? If you wanted to make a comment. Oh, not her. Oh, okay.
Oh, everybody's so shy today, huh?
I'd like to say, yeah, I don't usually like noisy places, but I remember when I had a baby that might cry. I love noisy places.
Very true.
Yeah.
Well, why couldn't you say that? You could, that's your opinion. But I find it very distracting. So I'm saying that you can give your student examples of things which really are important to you. That is one to me. I'd rather sit down with 24 people like I have right now, and they're all disciplined. They don't talk. It's very nice and quiet out here. But I'd like you to comment anytime along the way. Okay, so that's one thing I do. Be nervous. Are any of you ever nervous in a new social situation? I'm going to wait and see who tells me they are.
Of course.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Wait a second. Nancy, best. Okay. A brand new situation for our foreign-born student is happening all the time. Here's something to talk about to help with that. Let's talk about little children and when you were a small child and you were just learning to use words. Can you imagine you're going through the same thing now? And what does the little child do? Who remembers? Who had the little grandbaby out there that just learning to talk? What do? Anybody recall? Oh, no grandmothers out there, huh?
Oh, yeah. Well, when they're just learning to talk, they look at your mouth and they're mimicking and doing sounds, things like that.
And there goes that facial expression.
Mm-hmm.
And so your help, everything you teach concerns your mouth moving, doesn't it?
Yes.
Get a mirror. You need a mirror. You say something and don't forget to repeat it. And say it again. Oh, I would like to know more about that. Get the mirror, student, and you say, oh, I would like to know more about that. Tell me about that. You see what I have done? I have given a model how the voice might sound because they don't know our tonality. So that is something else I do. And then have them tell you a quick story about a subject that comes up out of the blue. Tell me what you think about this. And it's not to be a long conversation. Just tell them, I want one comment about it. I saw a man drop his wallet on the sidewalk. And I ran over quickly. And I picked it up and I said, oh, here is your wallet. It just fell out of your pocket. And what do you think he said to me? And your student will respond. And this is an opportunity for on the trigger, you know what I mean? Suddenly there's a conversation that is in front of you. You're foreign born, and you got to have something to say. What did I tell you you could always use? Tell me more about that. What happened? When? And don't forget the 5 W's. When did that happen? Why did that happen? Where? Don't forget those W's. And how did that happen? Well, let's watch our timing. Laurie, I have a few more points. Shall I go on? Laurie?
For another minute or so, do you want to wrap up?
Let me do that. Okay. You talk about using a mirror. Oh, here's one other talent. Get a friend who speaks your own language. The two of you have a discussion back and forth that might be small talk, practicing in their own language, and then tell them, practice the same small talk about gardening or travel in English. Take that same talk they just talked in their own language. Does that make sense to you, or need I talk more about it? Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's and they can do that. And don't forget in the mirror when you're talking, because you're using different voice tones. One more thing. The student may not have an opinion about something, and that's all there is. Opportunity to give an opinion. It's okay. Let me think about that for a while if they don't have the words. And by again and again, I say, help them practice listening. Yes, listen to you whenever you talk. Those are pearls. Those are gifts. When you speak English correctly, which all of you do, you are giving a gift. Okay, Laurie, take it away.
Thank you, Irene. I'm going to share my screen and share a PowerPoint presentation. I just have a few slides, and then I'm going to do a file transfer over Zoom with you. You should all be looking at a slide that says Functional English. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So the file that I'm going to transfer to you over Zoom is a set of worksheets, 30-some pages, that cover 7 different types of functional English. So in doing some research and talking to Irene, we talked about how there's some everyday scenarios that we find ourselves in, like giving and getting invitations, giving and responding to compliments, expressing concern, lodging a complaint, or apologizing when someone has complained to us, giving and getting advice, expressing opinions. So the worksheets are organized around these 7 different topics, and they range from very easy, what's small talk or things about how do you talk about the weather, how do you talk about what job somebody has, to more challenging aspects like expressing opinions on a controversial topic, right? So I would not try to teach all of these in one lesson by any shot. I have been using them with my students, and I've been choosing one a week to work on. So I'm not introducing too much information. I'm going to show you one of the sets of worksheets, but first I wanted to show you how they are all organized, because they use sort of a principle of teaching ESL students that is known as the 3 Ps. And I want you to remember the 3 Ps as present, practice, and produce. So the first step is to always present phrasing or a skill that you want your student to learn, to model it for the student and explain why they're using it. And then you want to give the student opportunity to practice those phrases with a lot of scaffolding. Think about a building that's under construction, has a lot of scaffolding around it to help it stay up. And so we are going to use 2 types of scaffolding exercises: the role play, where you practice a conversation that's written out, and the gap fill exercise, where part of a conversation is there and the student needs to complete it before practicing it. And then the final step is the production of the skill, where you're removing the scaffolding and hoping the student can use this new phrasing that they have learned in a genuine, authentic conversation. So let's see how that unfolds with just one of the worksheets. This one has to do with giving and receiving compliments. And I'll talk about how I did this with my student, Kyung Shil, who's sort of my guinea pig. So I went out and looked at different websites and videos to pull this material from. I did not write this stuff. So the first thing we did was we did a little bit of a warm-up on the issue of compliments. I found something to compliment her on, a new haircut. And then I asked her how she felt about getting the compliment. She felt good, right? Generally, we like to have compliments. And I was able to explain that compliments is a way to build a friendship with somebody new or cement a friendship. It's also a way to start a conversation when we see somebody for the first time. I also talked about how culturally in America, a lot of people don't accept compliments right off the bat. They tend to deflect or downplay a compliment so that they might be embarrassed, or they don't want to come across as being a snob, so they deflect a little bit. But it is never polite to just outright reject a compliment in our culture. So once we got that out of the way, I introduced some of these stock phrases that we tend to use when we are giving a compliment. And you'll notice on this particular worksheet, there are kind of plug-in noun, verbs, and adjectives. So we kind of reviewed what those parts of speech are, and we used some examples. Like for the first one, I've never seen anybody dance like you. You're a really good dancer. You have a way with music. That's such a beautiful dress. So we kind of talked about what adjectives and nouns we could fill into those blanks, and then we rehearsed them, and I had her listen to me, and I said each one of those phrases with a lot of intonation, right? I was stressing those nouns and adjectives, and then I had her repeat after me, and we went through that. Then the next step of this worksheet is phrases for accepting or deflecting, depending on how comfortable you are with that compliment. You might just say, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed that dinner. Or you might downplay it a little bit by saying, you really like it? Oh, it's nothing. So we practiced those phrases. And then we moved into the second part of practicing putting these phrases together into a complete conversation. So here's a role play that you can do. What we did was we took turns reading this together with expression. She played A, I played the part B, then we switched back and forth, and we did that a couple times until she was comfortable. And I gently corrected her pronunciation and intonation. until we had a conversation that felt smooth. And then the next step in practicing is to do the gap fill. Now this, because I'm using Zoom, I am able to use the annotation feature in Zoom, and I'm going to show you how this works. Some of you I know are using this, maybe some of you aren't. You can basically fill in the blank here to type in a phrase. So I would ask her, well, let's look at the phrases for compliments. What could we use to complete this sentence? Mickey, that dress, we might say, is beautiful. And then I would ask, okay, so if Mickey heard that, how would she respond? How would you respond if somebody complimented your dress? Maybe yes, maybe thank you for noticing. And the next aspect is one of those 5 W questions that Irene talked about that students can use to extend the conversation so it doesn't come to an end. Where did you find it? Well, then the person answers the question. I found it on sale. The pink color, you might say, looks, you know,
good on you.
Yeah, looks good on you. And then the final, you know, would be, thank you. And then once we had scoped out that, we filled in all the gaps, we would practice that conversation. So now the student has had 2 opportunities to practice putting those phrases together and see how you can extend it into a short conversation. Once she was comfortable with that, we moved into the, let me stop annotating here. We moved into, I got to clear my annotations. We moved into the production aspect, which is, okay, now we've got some scenarios here where you might want to give a compliment to somebody. And I'm sure you and your student could come up with other situations on your own where she might want to compliment somebody or somebody has complimented her. And then we would try to create a dialogue just between us using some of these stock phrases. Now, if you have a more advanced student, this is something that you might be able to do on the fly, just using the phrase list on the left. If you have a lower level student, you may need to do some more scaffolding and actually draft out a conversation from scratch with your student before you practiced it a couple of times. But at any rate, this is an opportunity for your student to further produce some of the language. And then as homework, I told my student who has a daughter in middle school that I wanted her to pay a compliment to her daughter in English. Find something that she was proud of her daughter and compliment her on it. And then, of course, we would, you know, continue in practicing compliments in the coming weeks with each other as part of our little warm-up exercise. So that's just how I used one set of these worksheets. It took me about 45 minutes to go through them. That's why I said it's a lot of material. I wouldn't do more than one set of worksheets at a time. Does anybody have any questions for me on the worksheets?
Where do we get them?
I am going to do a file transfer at the end of my talk through this chat window. So I wanted to show you one other goodie that I have. If you have PowerPoint, after you've done all of these worksheets, so your student will know how to politely lodge a complaint about something, respond to a complaint, they will know how to express an opinion on a topic, they will know how to seek advice. You can play this PowerPoint game where it imagines the scenario of your student being at a party. And there's all kinds of things that might happen at the party. And there's some different scenarios on this picker wheel. You just click spin and click it again to stop the wheel. And this is compliment the dessert. So you would ask your student, okay, how would you go up to the host and compliment the host on the dessert. Let's say the dessert was a special cake. What would you say? Let's practice using some of those phrases. So it's a way, it's just a fun way. If you don't have PowerPoint, you know, it's not a big deal, but it's a way to combine all of these different exercises together. And what might be a real situation, right? Hopefully one day your student would be able to go to a party with other Americans and feel comfortable engaging in small talk with them. Okay.
Laurie,
Yes.
just a quick question. In PowerPoint, is it something that plays in PowerPoint?
It plays in PowerPoint, yes.
Okay, it's an
So
automatic.
it's just a slide. Once you project it, which is what I just did, you just click on the wheel and it's been programmed
Oh,
to
okay.
spin for you. Okay.
That sounds like fun.
It does sound like fun. I know not everybody has access to PowerPoint, but all right. So what I'm going to do now is transfer the worksheets to you over the chat window. So at the bottom of your screen, if you click on the chat button, you're going to see these files coming through. They should show up in your chat window with a little icon that has like a files, Adobe Acrobat file or a PowerPoint and a downward arrow.
It's coming.
Yep. So when they show up in your window, you can click on that downward arrow to save them to your downloads folder of your computer.
There it is.
Yep, it's there.
So I'm sending them two different ways. I'm sending them as PowerPoint. I'm also sending them as a PDF. If you don't have PowerPoint, everybody can download a free Adobe Acrobat player. And if you have any trouble with the downloads, I also sent you a link where I have uploaded them to SharePoint, and you can just click on that link and find them online.
Oh, Laurie, on the PDF, it says we don't have permission to save.
No, I didn't have any trouble.
Really? Let's try
Did
again.
you click on the link, Pat, or the document?
I did. I hit save. Maybe I should, let me try to open it up first and see what happens.
Mine came up the same way, and I think it was talking about my own computer. It's going to save it in a different place.
That's possible.
Yeah,
It
I think
offered
that's
me
what it
a
is,
different option. So
Okay. I'll figure it out. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, there's no restrictions on the PDF.
Laurie,
Yes.
Laurie,
Could be my client, my
I
Chromebook
don't
not working.
remember what to do. Do I just click on the link?
You can do two things. You can click on the PDF, Lynn, the Functional English Worksheets that has the Adobe A next to it, and download it to your computer. If you have trouble doing that, you can click on that internet link that I posted. That will take you to a website, and everybody should have access to download from the website. So is anybody having problem getting those files?
Well, I am.
Oh, you are, Janet. Yes, I know.
yeah,
Janet, I can send them to you as a hard copy.
Yeah, could you send them to me as well? For some reason, it's not opening anything here.
Yeah, I'd like them as well, Laurie.
Oh boy, let me.
If you, whoever wants it, if you just put your name in the chat, maybe.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you can
Okay.
just save your chat and you'll get a list.
Okay.
All right, so we have a few minutes left. I wanted to open this up to any questions that you may have for me or Irene, or comments that you want to make on working with your students.
This was a wonderful session. Thank you.
Yes, it has been. I just want to throw this out here. I'm wondering if anyone else has the same experience. I imagine you would. I always give my students an assignment to talk with their family at home.
Very good.
And I will say, just if you do it for 5 minutes, you know, and 9 times out of 10, they don't do it. I mean, and they'll be honest, they'll, you know, respond kind of sheepishly, you know, but I was wondering if you've had the same experience.
I have a suggestion for that, and if you just ask them to do it, you'll find that they won't. But if you actually, like you're saying, do the scaffolding, create one, and then make an assignment that I did one with you talked to your daughter about her high school teacher schedule. And so her assignment was to talk to her daughter and ask her what her each hour, what her teacher was, what the subject was, how she's doing in it, and to have that full conversation. And she came back. She says, "I did it, Phyllis." She says, "My daughter didn't like it, but she did it with me."
Laurie,
That's a good
I have a
suggestion.
suggestion to that. My student had no one in her family, even though they could speak English, was willing to do any of that. I said to her, start using compliments and hear what they say back to you in Spanish. And then you know what you said, and then but try the positives, the compliments. It feels good at first they don't even respond to you. Oh, Mom, you look great today. See what you get.
Good idea.
I've been asking my student to have those conversations, just 5 minutes, right? Just 5 minutes with the whole family.
Right.
Husband who works here, daughter in 8th grade, son in 3rd grade. And I asked her then to make notes of what they talked about and then to tell me. So she's been pretty consistent with it, and I can hear her becoming more and more comfortable reading what she's written in English. So
that's great.
Good idea.
I'm hoping it's helping everybody, but I'd give her an assignment to report back to me more than just she did or she didn't.
Right,
So
right.
I don't know if
That's
that's
great.
too much pressure.
Good idea.
I'm hearing some accountability seems to help.
Yeah.
Right.
Idea.
I also think, one more thing, I think complaining and apologizing are biggies for everybody, even for us. We step into something, and they need language complaining and and Laurie's documents that she's sending you have lots of, well, excuse me and pardon me, rather, oh, I'm sorry, those little short that are easy to learn. So maybe if the student can feed into that, even if they do it in their own language at first, and then you translate. And I do think writing, we talked last time about running dictation. Laurie and I knew about that. Maybe some of you do. Write a comment, whether it's a complaint or an apology or a compliment, and then they write on paper an English response.
Okay. Those are good suggestions.
Suggestion that I use for my student, she's advanced. What she's having difficulty with are idioms.
Oh, yeah.
Have her write down, what did you hear that you didn't understand? And one of her first one was, this job was heavy on sticks and light on carrots.
I've never heard that one myself.
You know, we talked about dangling a carrot, and you know, she had been to Mackinac Island, so we knew about that. But she comes up almost every week with something she's heard that we use all of the time. And I told her that she's actually kind of lucky she's in the Midwest, because there are different things depending on what part of the country you're in and things like that. So I find that's very helpful. Things that she doesn't understand, that her husband doesn't understand. So that's another thing you might want to go over.
My student has been reading English books to her 3- and 5-year-olds, and they're just like the Elephant and Piggy books and whatever. The conversations that we've gotten out of those Elephant and Piggy books are incredible. Simple things like, you make me happy. She says, how can make be the right word in there? I mean, it's just amazing because it's
Good.
a whole different thing in her culture.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think
challenge.
it's been awesome.
It's been fun.
Well, you guys have good ideas to help each other. Any other comments or questions before we wrap this up?
I told you, Laurie, I'd get new. Now I'm going to read the elephant book.
Well, I think that these were really, really good suggestions because when I first started with my student and we were sitting elbow to elbow and we were describing something, and I said, what's the difference between this lady and that lady in the picture? And she said, oh, this one is fat. And I said, okay. So we started talking about, how to describe things like that politely. But, her culture, they were just very blunt, and what you see is what you get. And she said, oh, thank you, Phyllis, thank you. I said, you would never. So it's these are real things. They're very important. And now I look fast forward 9 months later, and she's much more elegant with and understands what's appropriate and what's not, how to share compliments or say things, describe things. So.
Great. Eric, did you have a question or comment?
This is a true story. Yesterday, I was talking with my student who was actually rather advanced, and she was telling me she was reading a story and didn't understand the term hook up.
That would have been interesting.
Patiently explained it means to meet up with somebody, but she wasn't quite satisfied with it. I said, does that mean in a dating relationship? So I yielded and said, we went to actually a good website for stuff like that is the Urban Dictionary. Explains a lot of street terms, slang terms, things like that, and what hookup means.
Urban Dictionary. Okay, thank you, Eric.
.com.
Yeah.
Eric, I thought you might have role played that with her.
Oh, there we go.
The only other thing I was going to say, it was occurred to me, if you haven't heard this, the past, the present, and the future all walk into a bar. It was tense.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you guys for giving your lunch hour to us today. We hope you'll walk away with some things that you can put to use next week with your students. And good luck. And thank you, Ben, for all
Thank
the
you, Irene.
This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you, Lori. That's a really good resource.